But I think where a lot of people are getting stuck right now is like there's kind of this wall between that and their literal experience of the faith day to day. And so it's kind of funny because you have these guys that, whoever, like men, women, pastors, whoever it is, like they'll wake up and there's this wall because it's like, man, I believe these things. I believe this about the Lord. I believe scripture. I believe Jesus is good, but I feel terrible. I am terrified of the day. I have no energy. I have no clarity. And it's funny because I think, again, I mean, it might be like the religious spirit, but it kind of has us thinking, I'm just getting attacked right now, And it's like, maybe, or maybe you need to go and lose 50 pounds.
For a lot of things,
for sure. Yeah. It's like, or maybe like there's a practical, like, dude, you're treating yourself like absolute trash, And again, and that's not coming from a place of shame or blame. It's like, man, nobody's showing us a better way.
Hey guys, welcome to the Kill the Dragon podcast. I'm your host, Gunnar Akridge, and author of the book by the same title, Kill the Dragon, Reclaiming Your Life from the Dark Side of Religion. And that's what this podcast is all about. We explore the themes related to the influence of the religious mindset in our lives. So if you've been hurt by religion, or if you're just like me and envision a church that looks more like Jesus than a dragon, then this podcast is for you. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button or give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Well, I'm excited to have Hunter Sprague on the podcast. Hunter is the founder of Monolith Movement that helps build Christian men into their God-given potential. We're going to have a really good conversation today around physical fitness. Welcome, Hunter.
Dude, thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Talk about what you got going on with Monolith.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Hunter Sprague, native Texan, been in Texas my whole life. We live outside of Austin. So married for almost 10 years. We have 3 little kids. Just turned 32. I spent pretty much the entirety of my adult life in full-time ministry in different, creative roles, worship, design, film, photography, storytelling, all that kind of stuff. So art direction, I mean, you name it, kind of anything in that vein. So, man, that's been a lot of my past, a lot of my experience. And through that, just through the years, really started to see a big deficiency in just in the physical and mental side of a lot of men, and so it was just this thing that became very apparent and obvious. Like, man, I've been given some tools. I've kind of been through the fire myself. And so, man, there's something I could really do here and, meet a need, something I'm really passionate about. So yeah, for the last couple of years, I've been running this Monolith Movement thing. And so man, we're just seeing how far it'll go. So it's been great.
Yeah. So what is Monolith? Coaching, and what all do you do?
Yeah. So the main thing is coaching. So we have a program called Muscle Discipleship. So at this point, taking, 80 or so guys through that. And it's been great. So it's just kind of the one thing, the one thing that I'm offering and selling and fulfilling right now. So yeah, man, it's been great. It's just been a process of like refining it and, making it better and adding things and taking things away. And, but in a nutshell, it's a transformation program. It kind of started out as just like, man, let's get Christian guys into kind of a bodybuilding kind of space and mindset. And man, just really grew from there. So like it kind of through the months have added community and a lot of like mindset coaching, life coaching, a lot of resourcing. And really the whole approach is like there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle. If you need to really reset or kickstart, a healthier lifestyle, better habits, you need to be more aligned with, kind of what you're called to and have the tools available to you to actually actually get there. So it's kind of grown into this thing that I didn't think it would be, and so that's been really exciting just to keep up with it. And so yeah, that's kind of where we've been at.
Cool,
Yeah.
man. Muscle discipleship. That's a cool name. Well, you might be wondering if you're listening to this, like, why are we talking about muscles? Disciples and muscles, but physical fitness, all this. What does this have to do with the religious spirit, mindset, killing the dragon? And I kind of just want to have a conversation about this because I've seen this not only in my own life, but I'm sure you've seen this in guys that are Christians. That there's just a little bit of a disconnect between faith and actually taking care of the temple of the Holy Spirit, our bodies. I think for a long time, personally, it was for me just a disconnect mentally in my head. It's like, I think we can get and I think it depends on personality a lot too. We can get so focused on the spiritual aspect of things and neglect the body, which is not, it's a spiritual thing too, taking care of our bodies. So how have you seen this, like a religious mindset, in a way disregard or distract from being physically healthy? Would you say that's a thing?
Yeah, I see that so much. And it's hard to say. I was thinking about this earlier, but I think for a large segment, right, this it becomes kind of a cop out, in a lot of ways. It's a I think one of the things you see a lot of people say would be, man, I don't want to get too into that because it might become an idol, right? Something like to that nature. So they kind of have this like veiled, like spiritual language. It makes you sound really devout. It makes you sound really holy. Like you're so concerned about idolatry in your life, right? But in reality, that is typically not the case, right? It is just kind of a cop out. It is an excuse, and it's just a way to kind of religiously kind of let yourself off the hook, because you kind of look at that kind of objection, saying like, man, I can't get too into that because it'll maybe become an idol, or I might get prideful. But it's just like, but apply that to anything else in your life, right? Like that, the potential of an idol is present in literally any sphere of your life, in your marriage, you as a father or a mother, as a pastor, as a leader, in your career, in your education, in whatever it is, right? But the funny thing is that people don't just stop doing those things. Nobody's out there saying, man, my marriage has become an idol, so I'm going to divorce my wife. Man, I'm idolizing fatherhood, so I'm just going to abandon my kids. I'm worried about idolizing my career, so I'm just going to phone it in, or I'm just going to quit, and I'm not even going to work, And so you kind of see this like all or nothing mentality. And there's like some concessions made in every other area of life, but then when you come to fitness, it's just, for whatever reason, it's become this thing that's just very easy to be like, I know I should do something about that, but I'm just not going to. And that's fine because I have an excuse of, this might become a problem, And so I think that's how it plays out a lot, for sure. And so that's one area, it kind of becomes this very spiritually, kind of, it's almost like a Jesus juke, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But then for, in other ways, I think you have this really deep rooted Gnosticism, and, it'd be like a functional Gnosticism. And it's just saying like, man, nothing physical matters at all. It's all going to burn. So who cares? Let it burn. I'm just sitting here in my bunker waiting to die, to go to glory, and there's no care for the body or for anything physical, and that's also completely incongruent. Like that doesn't make sense because it's you're rejecting the created order. You're rejecting creation as a whole, right? You're missing this massive piece of the Lord's provision and of his beauty and of his creativity in making our bodies how they are, in making the created things how they are. And like, man, those things they're not this like danger. Those things can be something that we look at we say, man, praise God for that. Like, that's incredible. Like, I'm going to worship you because of that. And so I think the religious spirit really just has a way of like giving you these really tiny rails to run on.
Yeah.
And it kind of rejects anything on either side of that. And so you really end up with this very one-dimensional faith, this one-dimensional life. And man, it's just, you're missing out on a lot, is what I would say.
Yeah, that's true. That whole black and white thinking of either or. I was thinking about this verse. I've heard this used a lot for mainly from pastors who maybe are not very attuned to their weight and their fitness.
Mm-hmm.
So, Paul said that bodily exercise profits little.
Oh,
Have you ever heard that one before?
Oh, dude. Yeah. I made a post about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
That's a great example, of like, man, you can just turn it just enough. Cause yeah, that verse, I actually had that pulled up, but it's, 1 Timothy 4:8-12. It's, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. And so people would throw that out as like, so Paul's saying it just doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, some and none are two different words. Like, those are literally two different words with two different meanings. He's not saying none. He's saying it is of value. Like, and we have to see that. And I think, there's also a lot of just really interesting kind of cultural, context around that, right? Like, who was Paul speaking to? He was speaking to an extremely athletic, aesthetic culture. I mean, you could, by all means, assume that Paul would have been witnessing to guys that were training as wrestlers, as Olympians, as athletes. And not once did he say, hey, this is of no value. Stop doing this. What did he do? He said, hey, like, man, this, over and over. I mean, he uses this very athletic kind of fitness kind of language, like, I beat my body into submission, like things like that. So, you can see how, he's never just saying stop doing that. He's saying, hey, there's something in you that's really good about that, but ultimately it's not going to satisfy you like Jesus will. Right. That's exactly what all of us are saying. It's so funny because, again, that kind of brings back that like either or kind of scenario in people's heads of like, you either are going to love your body and fitness, or you're going to love the Lord. And it's just like, those aren't mutually exclusive, And so another verse like that's come up to me a lot recently is Ephesians 5:29, which, Paul's, it's context of, marriage, obviously, but for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it just as Christ does the church. And so there's almost this assumption of a sense of care, right? Yeah. So he's saying, like, it's interesting, like, man, none of you guys like just hate your flesh. You love your flesh. Like, you feed it, you nourish it. So like, do that for your wife, right? Yeah. But again, practically, functionally, I look around and I would say I would see a lot of functional self-hatred of the body. You look at like the standard just American Western way of life. And again, that might not be your heart, that you hate yourself, that you're just like capsizing your health, or, you're just completely, but functionally that's what you're doing. I mean, we have to be really honest with that and kind of blunt about that. And so I thought that was really, really interesting, that, I mean, even there, he's like, there's an assumption of like a level of care for your health, but again, practically, it's like, that's not the norm these days, for sure. And I think that's really concerning.
Yeah. Well, I know personally, just growing up in the church, kind of had a religious mindset for most of my life. And like I said, we're all on the journey. None of us have arrived. We're still getting some of the religion out of us and all. But one of the things that I have neglected most of my Christian life is my physical health. And so, everything that comes with that, anxiety, depression, all of that, and just never really connected the whole need for it as a spiritual thing and something to actually bring into my relationship with the Lord. And about 2 years ago, I was sitting in a prayer room at our church and just waiting on the Lord, and just I was silent before him. We had some worship music going on, and I don't know how to explain this other than I just became aware of how I had not taken care of myself, and I just wasn't feeling good. I was already, I'm 41 now. I was about 39 years old at the time. I already had high blood pressure. I had all kinds of things going on physically that just, I was like, man, I'm too young. I'm too young for all this, But in that moment, I just felt a sense of shame about how I had treated myself, basically. And then it was almost like the Lord, I didn't hear his voice or anything like that, but it was almost this assurance of like, hey, if you'll do this with me, it'll be different this time.
Yeah.
Because I had tried to do, dieting. I've tried to do exercise. I was so my consistency was just non-existent. And, but something clicked for me in that moment of like, oh, like the Lord actually cares about my health, and I should too. I should be actually care about this. And so it was that moment of like that shame lifted off, and it was almost like an invitation from the Lord of like, hey, let's do this together.
Yep.
And honestly, that's been the game changer for me, in consistency. And, I've still got goals. I'm not quite there, but I'm moving forward in the right direction. And it's a game changer when you think of it that way. And I know that finding you online, but we've had some conversations around this stuff too. And it's just been a huge help for me just on my health journey. And, so what are some of the, maybe I love the thought of marrying your faith, your relationship with the Lord with that physical, even mental health too. Like, what are some ways, how do those two relate? Maybe talk around that, and how can we make that happen in our lives?
For sure. I mean, you're in ministry. I've spent a lot of time in ministry, and I love the mindset, the framing of, we're not here for behavior modification. We're here for heart change. Right. And I think that's exactly what you just said. Like, that was the turning point for you, because you tried these like behavior modification, like, and that's the religious spirit, right? That's what that is, just like, man, I'm just going to clean myself up, but nothing deeper is happening in me. And so that makes it way harder, obviously, because you're talking about really deep layers. You're not just talking about, man, I'm going to get on a diet. It becomes, and this is kind of like how I coach. This is my whole framework, is it can't just be 100% practical. I have no interest in just giving people a workout plan. Like, that is so boring to me. I can do it all day long, like, whatever, but it's like that. So it needs to be this kind of 50-50 split, of like, man, half of it is going to be this intangible thing that is driven by conviction. It's driven by alignment. And the other half, is a lot of practical things, but man, I think if you can marry those two, like, you'll be in a way better spot, and this will all be way more enjoyable. And, because for me, the kicker is just making these things a rule of life, like, these things are just in your mind. It's like, man, this is just what is becoming of me as a child of God, And so when I choose to do those things, that is unaligned. And so I think, man, one of the things that's, one of the frames that's kind of been helpful for me is just to realize, like, man, everything comes back to this kind of created order, so when, we've had conversations about like testosterone, it's like, I think a lot of people in the church would look at that and be like, oh, that's just like, you just want to be this like alpha guy that never struggles or never suffers, or it's anti-aging, that kind of thing. Right. And it's just like, no, dude, like, who created testosterone and why? Who created endorphins? Who created all of these chemical realities? That's not our idea. That's not secular science. Like, that's the Lord. Right. The Lord did that. And that is the order that he set out for us, and so you can bring all of this stuff down to like the tiniest chemical level and see the realities of creation there. And I think starting there is a really good point, because it gives it a lot of legs, but man, I think that's definitely some of the places where I would start, and just thinking through, just that sense of alignment, like,
Mhm.
what does it mean to be created in the image of God? What does that
Mm.
mean? What does it mean to be embodied? And I think that those are the things we've really missed. And I don't, and I'm sure that's a modern church thing. I'm sure that's a Western church thing, but that sense of embodiment has really, really been missed. And so what we end
Mhm.
up doing is we end up with just a mental faith. So we sincerely believe and think and know some things, right? But I think where a lot of people are getting stuck right now is like there's kind of this wall between that and their literal experience of
Yeah.
the faith day to
Mhm.
day. And so it's kind of funny because you have these guys that, or whoever, like men, women, pastors, whoever it is, like they'll wake up and there's this wall because it's like, man, I believe these things. I believe this about the Lord. I believe scripture. I believe Jesus is good, but I feel terrible.
Yeah.
I am terrified of the day. I
Yeah.
have no energy. I have no clarity. And it's funny because I think, again, I mean, it might be like the religious spirit, but it kind of has us thinking, I'm just getting attacked right now, And
Mhm.
it's like,
Yeah.
maybe,
We
or maybe
we
you
like to
need to
blame
go
we
and
like to
lose
blame the
50
devil for
pounds.
a lot of things, don't
For
we?
sure. Yeah. It's like, or maybe like there's a practical, like, dude, you're treating yourself like absolute trash, And again, and
Yeah.
that's not coming from a place of shame or blame. It's like, man,
Right.
nobody's showing us a better way. What else would you do? And all of a sudden, like, you do
Yeah.
get into this fitness thing, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. You kind of are the
Mhm.
odd one out because you're saying no to this or you're choosing this over that, and there has to
Yeah.
be a sense of sacrifice for sure. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
hard part. That's why people don't last very long. So but I think those are the questions. You kind of have these intangible things, and just thinking through, man. Yeah, what does it mean to be the Imago Dei? What does it mean to be embodied? What does it mean to be a new creation?
Mm.
And you start thinking through those kinds of things and looking for those answers. Um,
Mm.
but then a lot of it, man, yeah, is just living in reality. And
Yeah.
it's uh, I think again, just like with your story, it's kind of like going hand in hand with the Lord and just saying like, hey, there's some responsibility here. There's some
Mhm.
things to do here, and I'm very careful. It's like especially with like younger men. It's like, man, we've been played a really bad hand. That's not
Mm.
our fault. But we do have some agency there. We do have some responsibility there. Um, and again, this isn't a law. This is not a burden. This is not a religion in itself,
Right.
but I think it's just reframing it in your mind of like, man, praise God that I get to do these kinds of things, and
Yeah.
if I'm going to have this massive vision and seek all of this leadership and want to have all this impact, it's like, where am I drawing that from?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of guys, like, they think that just their education, their theology, the books that they've read will be enough to fulfill that. And it will be a lot of it
Yeah.
for sure. I'm not saying to not know your stuff, but
Right.
that goes hand in hand. It's just like, man, you can have all of this mental knowledge, but then without the physical and mental clarity and energy to actually see those things through, it's like, dude, you're a ticking
Yeah.
time bomb, man. Like, you can't expect much. And so again, not a law, you don't have to do any of it. You're not a burden. You don't have to
Mhm.
do any of it. But you need to make sure that, man, am I on the path to, am I getting down the road to be who I feel like, I'm called to be, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of layers to that.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the other angle that we get with the whole religious mindset sometimes, in that we too often in the church we're motivated by guilt and shame
Mm,
and all of that stuff rather than hope of what could be.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was where I was stuck for a long time too, is like, oh, I just feel bad that I'm not eating right. I feel bad that I don't have a good workout
Mhm.
routine. I feel bad that I'm not, getting exercise,
Yep.
but I never do anything about it. And because shame never motivates, not for long. It might motivate you to get off the couch, for a couple of days, but that hope of giving people, not just men, but women, whoever's listening to this,
Yeah.
just giving hope of like, there's a better version of life
Oh,
when you
yeah.
take care of your body.
Yeah.
That's been the biggest revelation for me, is like, just like you were talking about, the mental clarity.
Mhm.
I feel like my mind, if I'm to the point now, and I used to hear people say this, but like, if I can't get in the gym, or if I can't exercise, like, I just feel off.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how awful I was feeling all the time
Yeah. Yeah.
before I
Yep.
started, getting
For sure.
exercise and everything. And so,
Mhm.
people ask me sometimes I post on Sunday morning, and I'm a pastor, and like, I'll go into the gym on Sunday morning
Love it.
early,
Yeah.
because I know I preach better when
Oh,
I've
yeah.
taken care of my body, when I'm just like, it's just mental clarity. I can think.
Yep.
And so,
100%.
don't hear this conversation, if you're listening or watching. Don't hear us saying like, oh, you should do better.
No.
You should do better. No, what we're trying to get across is, there's a there's a lot better life on the other
Yeah.
side of just making good choices when it comes to your health.
That's a huge point, 'cause it's like, man, just seeing both sides of the spectrum, right? Because it's like over here, it's like, man, there are literally things to worry about. Like if
Yeah.
I'm talking to a guy that's 25, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight,
Mhm.
low T, high blood pressure, borderline diabetic, it's like, bro, you need to have a realistic picture of what this means in 5 years, in
Yeah.
10 years, in 15, and 20. Like you've kind of dug yourself into a hole. So there is this kind of like really blunt, kind of dark thing. But with
Mhm.
that being said, it is understanding. I think that's where people get kind of caught, because they don't fully believe that the other side is that much better.
Yeah.
They're not convinced of that. And so why would I go through all of the hard work to kind of pull myself out of this pit to get there,
Mhm.
if I don't even know if that's really going to be worth it?
Right.
Um, but I think all of that entire journey is it's a beautiful picture of what the Lord does all the time. He takes a very like sad and dark and depressing
Yeah.
reality, and he, like, the fact that we would have to work out, right? I mean, I would say, yeah, in a lot of ways, it's the result of the fall. We have to like kind of measure up in that way, right? To just be at a baseline.
Mhm.
We're not just there all the time in perfection and glory, right? So,
Mhm.
but I would say the Lord has redeemed that at the same time. So it's not this, again, it's not this like burdensome law, this heavy yoke. It's like, man, this
Right.
is a gift to you.
Yeah.
This is a grace to you that you can go and do these things, and you will have a picture of that grace, like, as it's like everybody always talks about. It's like, you'll walk into the gym feeling a certain way, and you'll walk out feeling a way different way. And that,
Mhm.
and it's like,
Yeah.
that's a very tangible expression of that, of just like, hey, see, like, this is how I've created you. Like, do you see how you feel right now? Do you see how much
Mhm.
clarity you have right now? Like, I know people that they don't even make big decisions unless they're at the gym or leaving the gym, because they're like, man, that is the most aligned, almost
Mm.
like true version of myself. Because I'll just go into the gym, I'll listen to scripture, I'll listen to, a sermon,
Yeah.
I'll listen to something that is, or worship music. It's like feeding me. So you have this, like, you have the endorphins, you know, and you have the encouragement of the word or a trusted pastor or voice, and you come out and you're like, okay, everything feels as it should, and
Mhm.
so this is what I can use. I can use that as ammunition to, yeah, go write that sermon, go preach that sermon, go write that book, go help these people. And
Mhm.
so again, all this, there's just so many layers to it, dude. It's like we could talk all day long,
Yeah.
but there's a layer of just like, man, it's just a blessing to you, and is a gift
Yeah.
from the Lord. And so, man, again, just making that shift in your mind is massive, because, yeah, again, most people never get there. It feels like a burden, and it's
Yeah.
rooted in shame. It's rooted in, man, I'm just not measuring up. And people are so burdened, and they feel like they already can't, they can't measure up anywhere,
Yeah.
let alone add this
Yeah.
whole layer of, okay, now I need to eat differently and live differently and make time for the gym and spend this money here. And it feels like a lot, for sure. But
Yeah.
it is just that understanding of, like, I know what happens if I don't. And I really want to see what happens if I do. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the place to get yourself in mentally, and you'll be super surprised. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe it's not as hard as we think it is either,
No.
as far as having there's no perfect plan. There's
No.
there's no magic formula to it. It's just move, eat healthy things. And, that's kind of what we're designed to do anyway. It's just that our lifestyles are such with technology and all that, but again, we can use as an excuse too, can't we? So,
Yeah.
but, well, man, I know we could talk about this forever. I know that, you got a lot to say about this stuff, but, we're running out of time. But I would like to ask you a question. The question I usually get to, our guests most of the time. How are you staying encouraged these days?
Man, I think a lot of it is just having the right people around you, that really, really get you, that really see something in you that you don't see in yourself, that can call you out when you need to be. I think that environment, that community is everything. Man, just daily time in the Word. I'm going through this, New Testament in 90 days kind of thing. So that's been really fun, really encouraging. But yeah, man, there's a lot of layers to that, because I feel like I need that a lot, so I think it's just kind of like, again, I mean, it's just kind of like designing, your lifestyle around that piece, and knowing what you need, and making sure the voices that you're taking in are the right ones, I think is a really big deal.
You definitely need good community in your faith journey, your health journey, and everything. So I know that's one of the things you're trying to create with Monolith. So maybe tell us where we can find more about you and more about Monolith, how we can be a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm just on Instagram right now. It's at Monolith Movement. So you can find just all sorts of stuff there. If you have any interest in the program, shoot me a message, and we'll talk from there. But yeah, lots of fun stuff coming down the pipeline. I mean, a big part of this is the community, and just realizing, man, it's a lot of people are in a place where they're surrounded by, good Christian people that are very sincere. But kind of getting into this lifestyle can be lonely. I mean, it really can, and so just getting around the right people, being in the right room with the right voices that are pushing you and encouraging you, even though they're not in your city, they're all the way across the country, man, it can be a huge game changer. And so, man, it's that's really what we've built, and we're continuing to build. And but man, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I have a lot of excitement and hope for the future from here, for sure.
Well, I'm thankful for what you're doing, man, and I'm thankful for who you are and how you're kind of helping us all get healthier and marry those two, marry our faith and our physical fitness and all that. So, hey, thanks so much for being on today. It's been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, thanks for listening to the podcast today. We hope this has helped you in your own journey of slaying the dragon in your life and getting healthier and feeling better and having some hope. So if this has helped you at all, would you consider leaving a review? It'd help other people find the podcast so that they could benefit as well. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, all that stuff. Share it with a friend. If you're interested in diving deeper into the content of what we talked about today as far as the religious mindset, my book, Kill the Dragons, available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. And you can reach out to us at killthedragonbook.com with questions. And yeah, very special thanks to Hunter. Thanks, man, for being on.
Thanks for having me.
And a big shout out to Joel Auger, who wrote and recorded our Totally Rad theme song you're hearing right now. You can find his music wherever you get your music. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time on Kill the Dragon.